Hey, Next Levelers, Bob Gibbons here. Looking forward to another episode of the Next Level Show, and glad you're with us. So today's show is with David Fontenot and Scott Edwards. They are the founders of Adaptive Medical Partners. They're going to be doing surgery on me here this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's all I got was a little chuckle.
Good morning.
We sometimes think we're doctors, but we have not been to medical school.
Okay. All right. Well, that fell totally flat, but you know what? That's my life, right? So welcome to the show, guys. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So give us the quick synopsis, David. What is Adaptive Medical Partners?
We recruit physicians to facilities all across the country, currently working in 40-some-odd states, working on 50 on a permanent basis. So,
okay, so physician recruitment.
Physician recruitment.
And 40 states. That's a lot. So do you have locations all around the country, David, Scott, or do you do it all from here?
He means clients. We're based in Irving, so we've got all of our employees local, but we do fly out all over the country and meet with the doctors and the clients, the hospitals that are choosing to work with us. So we've got clients in 43 states.
Wow. And are a lot of these clients like chains of hospitals that, you know, you have them as a client, but they have a bunch of different locations, or is it more one-off?
Some are. We work for some pretty large organizations that have hospitals all across the country, right down to small private practice, just one doctor with the wife running the office and, just need a partner sort of scenarios.
Really?
Yep.
Now that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed. I figured in your space you would want to have a client that has sort of more repeat customers than somebody that might just be sort of a one-off. Because, I mean, an individual doctor that brings in a partner, that's pretty much a one and done, isn't it?
It is, but we work with everything from that all the way up. Most of the facilities we're working for hospitals that have multiple needs that are ongoing, and with the physician shortage being what it is, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of need out there, especially in the rural markets, for us to go and work on. What's great about working for those small organizations like that, a private practice, is that we do good work for them, and then they tell somebody else, and we start helping them out too.
That is a beautiful thing. Nobody hates a referral, right?
Yeah.
So, Scott, how did this show get started? How'd you get the idea, and why'd you go out on your own?
Well, second of all, but just to go off his comment a little bit, we do work with national healthcare chains, you know, some household you've heard of, and academic centers and things of that nature. But what started it just completely fell into this business. Was looking for a job like anybody else in their 20s, trying to find their way, sales background, and I got called by a recruiter, and that's how I got my start. I had never heard of it when I got the first phone call, and served some time with another firm.
Were you doing physician recruitment at that time?
Physician recruitment, yes, I was.
Okay.
That's my background. So was pretty good at it. Got promoted to partner fairly quickly and had a team and was proven to be successful, and just decided that I like kind of doing things my way. I have a certain philosophy and a certain gut instinct with business, and wanted to test that out on our own.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into it.
How about you, David?
Whenever you go through a layoff, everybody says, it happened for a reason. That's how I ended up in this business. Is I got laid off from a big medical group in Dallas, and fell into this after doing it for I always wanted to start my own business, but after doing this for a couple of years, I love the business. It's not for everybody, but it got its hooks in me. And Scott and I together, we worked together closely. We felt like we could do this on our own, and we felt like we could do it our way on our own. So we started Adaptive 2010.
So what do you do differently on your own that others weren't doing? I mean, what was the difference?
I think it's a philosophy in that what we're working on hardest and what we're trying to do for our clients is very simple. We're trying to place a candidate. So everything we do as an organization is around placing that physician candidate or mid-level provider, whatever it is they're looking for, with the organization. So everything internally, even starting with our business development team and the way they go out and the consulting that they're doing on the front end, it's looking after the client the very best way that we know how to do, and always putting that job first and making sure that everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis with efficiencies and with the management in the office, and our focus as an organization is all around that one thing. And you'd think that that's true for every organization out there doing this. But
Yeah, because if you ask them, they're going to say that.
Sure, but it becomes more complicated than that, especially working with the large organizations and trying to run a business and trying to focus on revenues at the same time as focusing on client care. Sometimes those two things battle each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let Scott take it from here because I know he's got some opinions on on this too.
About what's different?
Yeah.
Basically, our approach, we like to innovate and try things that no one else is doing. We see what works well with other industries, and we've over time just been kind of leaders in jumping in on that and using that as it applies to our business.
You talking about like technology type stuff?
Yeah, technology, web-based things that we do, some proprietary things that we have as well. Text messaging and things like that. Those are absolutely huge, and there's no secret there. But using platforms to get the word out about jobs via text message and things like that, we've been doing for years and years. When our industry tends to be a little bit caveman, it's a little archaic, it's a little bit slow to progress, just in general. Now, there's companies out there doing wonderful things, and they embrace technology as well. But I think that's one of the things that we've appreciated is doing things different, not just the way we learned how to do it and not just the way that other people are doing it, but doing it, with our own flavor, and then taking the approach of the market is so difficult to find doctors now that we believe you have to do everything. You have to do the old-fashioned caveman way. That's cold calling, that's direct mailers, things like that, all the way to whatever the latest technology might be. And I think you need to do all of them all of the time.
Really?
To be successful on a high level, because there's a lot of search firms out there. There's way more jobs than there are doctors. So people that pick one avenue to attract physicians or one way of doing things, I think are going to eventually get left behind, because I just firmly believe you have to do everything.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, because in so many industries there's that sort of old way of doing things. I'm in the commercial real estate business, so it's, smile and dial. You're always picking up the phone, calling somebody, walking in their door, just trying to find a way to create a relationship out of thin air. And all your competitors are doing the same thing. But now with technology, are there not better ways to do that? Or are there other ways you can be supplementing that to establish that relationship, even to create that relationship? So, and you mentioned texting. So, texting is something that I'm seeing used far more than ever. Of course, a lot of clients of all ages are doing that, with me anyway. So do you use the texting as a way to just communicate with the client you already have, or is it more of a marketing opportunity?
There's some of that for our clients that we already have that we're working with. Sure, if we're wanting to do interview feedback or set up details on a visit or something of that nature. But I think what I'm talking about is more of the prospecting on the front end, especially the younger physicians. They're actually preferring that mode of communication, and the results are much better. We're getting way more responses, better responses, and it's actually something they prefer. So we just use different platforms for that. We're not talking about shooting one-off text messages to each and every doctor you're looking for.
So you're using a platform for a broadcast kind of thing.
Exactly, more robust. These things cost money, and there's a lot of things that we do that cost a lot of extra money, different subscription-based things that we're involved with. We can have a broad reach, geo-targeted physicians around a certain zip code or whatever it might be, for example. We're willing to spend the money to go out and try new things. Not all of them are great ideas. Sometimes you have to try something, scrap it, try something else, scrap it. But in general, I think you always got to be running towards the technology. You got to be running towards better ways to do things, and take a look at the results and go from there.
I hear you have somebody on your staff that's pretty good at texting, the texting technology. So Matt Davis and your firm and my son used to work together at a texting technology company. And Matt's here in the room, so he's on camera, but he's not talking. So we'll try and get him to talk later on about things that my son did I didn't know about.
He is a communications director, so.
So you guys are a retained search firm.
That's
so
right.
David, how does that how is that different than any other kind of search firm?
Well, there's all different flavors these days, but there's a lot of competition in the retained market set. I mean, it's that industry's been around since the 80s in some retained way. But there's a commitment, a financial commitment from the organization, from the facility that we're recruiting to, that supports the work when we begin. It's not just solely based on when we place a candidate, then we have the financial commitment. Then it's they're sustaining that work. Because it's not just one recruiter working with a facility on a search. There's more behind the scenes than that. There's one main point of contact with us, with our recruiter, but they're going to have research support with research recruiters that are helping them drive candidates. They're going to have admin support. Standing behind every single search that we represent, there's probably 4 to 7 people, depending on the difficulty and what needs to be given to that search because of urgency.
Okay, got it. All right, we're going to take our first break, and we will be right back. All right, we are back with Scott Edwards and David Fontenot. They are with Adaptive Medical Partners. You can find them online at adaptivemedicalpartners.com. So I was interested in the pre-interview materials that you guys provided. That David, you worked on a tugboat? Is this real?
Well, I'm born and raised in Texas. A lot of my family's in the southeast part of the state, down on the Gulf Coast, so it's not uncommon down there for young men and women to go out and work on boats and rigs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I tell people that, they look at me and they're like, "You really did that?"
I mean, it sounds awesome, actually.
But yeah, I worked on a tugboat where we went out into Galveston Bay and Houston Ship Channel and areas like that, and we fueled the ships that were coming in from all over the world. A lot of Filipino ships and Chinese ships and folks like that. But we would go out and fuel them up because the ships were too big to come in and fuel on the dock. So we would go out to them and fuel them.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
I told myself only 2 years. Only 2 years and I'm gone, because I have friends that I still keep in touch with that are captaining boats. And if you do it more than 2 years, you're there forever.
Really?
Yeah. You get locked in.
But that's kind of the way it is in a lot of things. I mean, I started in real estate while I was in college still. So 2 years in college, I'm in real estate. And guess what? 35 years later, I'm still here.
It happens, yeah.
And so, Scott, you were a DJ, I hear.
Oh,
so you know all about radio.
I wouldn't say I know all about radio. I had a startup startup program. It was alternative music in about 2001, I believe it was, in Atlanta. They were kind enough to give me the midnight shift, so a lot of people couldn't really hear it. Uh-huh. But it was good fun, and I did it for only about 3 or 4 months, so it wasn't a long-term gig for me. I got paid basically nothing.
Did you get to pick all the music you?
No, you have to act like you are, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my son was a DJ in college as well, and on the college station, and he didn't get to pick anything that was. It was hard enough getting to pick what you get to say, much less what you get to play. So that was interesting. He only did it for like 3 or 4 months as well. But anyway, but still, it sounds cool. I mean, how many people get to say they were a rock and roll DJ?
Not many. I mean, it started off as an internship while I was in college, and I had a lot of freedom. I could say whatever I wanted to say as long as it wasn't explicit.
Yeah.
But they gave me a ton of freedom, which was fun.
How fun. I think that'd be a blast to do that, although I guess it could be kind of lonely, especially on that midnight shift.
Yeah. I had friends, though. They all stayed up. They'd listen. So it was kind of fun in my circle. Yeah. My family would stay up, and somewhere there's tapes and CDs of it somewhere. But my sister just recently visited town and told me that, and so I got to make sure I find those.
Yeah, I was going to say,
because
you destroy those.
Yeah. They're going to be very embarrassing.
No. You need to find those, put them all together, get rid of the music, and just put your comments together and string those together for YouTube or
and
something.
Burn it. No.
Burn it. That's funny. Maybe they can play it on a tugboat somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more romantic than working on a tugboat.
Do you really think so? I don't know. I think they're both kind of cool because they're just not.
I was out there and actually did it. So
I mean, come on. I was a bus boy, and I mean, how fun is that? Not at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, let's get back to Adaptive. So, how did you come up with the name Adaptive Medical Partners? Because I mean, I kind of joked at the beginning of the show, the bad joke, but it kind of sounds very medical, and I don't know if that's, hey, I'm going to come in there to get some procedure done or something else.
Well, remember earlier when I was saying we wanted to be different. We wanted to be very forward with the fact that we were going to be different. And we tossed around a lot of names. Adaptive Medical Partners wasn't actually my favorite name, but I liked the idea of telling what we were right there in the title, right there in the name, that there was going to be something different about us. I didn't know if that would cause people to be a little more intrigued, but want to learn more. But it helps us to actually live by the title of our name. We use it all the time with our employees about how we like the way we work around a problem, the way that we go find new solutions to things and adapt to whatever the client's needs are, because all these clients are very different. They all have different constraints, chains of command. Some have boards they're answering to. Sometimes you're dealing directly with the CEO. Sometimes you're dealing with an in-house recruiter. I could go on, but it's always different. And if you're very rigid in your approach, if you treat every client the same exact way, you're not going to get good results, and you're going to end up with unhappy clients. And in the end, not be successful in finding them doctors. So the ability to adapt is essential, especially now. It was true when we started the company, 9 years ago, but it's especially true now. It's because it keeps changing and changing and changing, and there's just a lot of constraints that these hospitals, and the larger they are, those constraints they're working with, the people they're answering to, and budgets are tight. You name it.
So is it? You're only doing physicians, is that right? So you're not doing like the CEO of the hospital, or?
We do a little bit of that just because we're so connected with some of the facilities that we're working with. But beyond physicians, one thing that we do a lot of is mid-level support for physicians. So extenders, a nurse practitioner or a PA.
Physical therapists, dentists.
Okay. Interesting. Because, I had a friend who was in the same space recruiting physicians, but he would also do chief of staff, he would do CEO of the hospital, things like that. And he called me one day and said, I need to talk to you because I have this opportunity to get the assignment for the VP of real estate for a hospital chain. And I need to know more about the real estate. So we talked, and he actually did get that assignment. Then he says, all right, now I need resumes. And he says, send me yours. I'm like, that does not sound like anything I want to do. And I ended up giving it to him, and 6 months later, I'm the last man standing. And the offer never came, which was a little weird. But anyway, so he definitely found that he did a great job on one thing, and then they would just sort of pull him into all these other areas because they trusted him. And it's all about the relationship, right? It's
about the relationship, and recruiting, I think, is recruiting. It can be the methodology and the way that we approach it, and our tools and that sort of thing is. It can be used for executive search, as long as it's executive search within a facility, because we have access to all of those people, and we've got a lot of relationships with a lot of those folks. And the word of mouth too. We have administrators from time to time that we form really strong bonds and relationships with because we worked with for so long, and they find that they're on the look for something else, and we'll just put our ear to the ground and try to share those leads whenever we can. There's no we're not contracted with anyone to do that sort of thing, but we do that from time to time. But occasionally we have facilities that have a CFO that they need to replace, or they have a gap in their executive staff, and we add it on to everything else we're doing because, again, we've got access to all those folks.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, although, do you find a risk if you have a client in one place and they have a certain need, but a client somewhere else has the person that is going to be perfect for that? How do you manage that?
We would never do that.
We wouldn't.
We would never pillage from one paying client to no. We would never do that. Conflicts of interest, they bite you in the long run. We stay away from conflicts of interest.
How do you navigate that though? I mean, if you've been developing a relationship with a doctor, let's say, and she's at Colorado Springs, I'll just pick a city, and she's in Colorado Springs, but you have an opportunity in Fort Worth, and she wants to move, but she's working with a client. How do you?
It's happened before, so sometimes transparency is the key. So if we've already placed that provider at a particular location that's a paying client, that sometimes that provider, it's happened before, they'll reach back out and say, Scott, I'm looking again. What's going on? What's wrong? You try to manage and see if there's anything that's a misunderstanding or a communication you can clear up, something you can go and fix for them. Maybe it's they didn't get their sign-on bonus. Maybe it's whatever their pay was based on didn't work out the way they thought it would. And so a lot of times it's on misunderstandings, because a lot of times doctors and hospital executives are the last people to actually communicate and talk, which is surprising. So there's a lot of assuming going on. Everybody's busy. And so to sit down and work through an issue is it can be rare depending on the facility. So what you'll do is you'll try to help fix the situation first and foremost, because you have a lot of pride behind that placement. You place this physician or provider at this particular location. You want to see it work out for the long haul.
Yeah.
Not just short term and you get your placement fee and you're done. You want to see it work out for 10 plus years. Those are some of my favorite placements I have. That the very first guy I placed, by the way, is still at his practice.
Oh, nice.
In Lincoln, Nebraska. So that's kind of cool to me. The very first person I ever placed is still there. So you'll try to work it out. If you can't work it out, and they're like, I'm leaving, I'm sorry, and then some things happen. There's a turnover in administration. The situation has changed for some reason. The business wasn't there, so they're not getting busy or whatever it is. And if it can't be fixed, then you just have to have transparency with the administration.
Yeah.
You'll have to say, all right, have you already told them? Have you put on your notice? And a lot of times that answer is yes. And then if the answer is yes, you'll communicate with that administration. Say, hey, I know Dr. X is leaving, and do you mind? We're going to go ahead and work with them on their next practice. And being transparent, I think you avoid those conflicts typically. So
yeah, I mean, disclosure solves lots of conflicts. Yeah. And and I deal with a lot of conflicts in our business, or potential conflicts. Mm-hmm. And so you're right, disclosure is important. But I got to think that as you grow and you get more people and more clients around the country, this could potentially happen more frequently. And so that disclosure makes a lot of sense. So whenever you're recruiting, I mean, how do you find the doctors, the prospective candidates? I mean, is there some database of all these people somewhere that you can tap into?
Yes, the answer is you do everything, like we talked about earlier. So we have access to every physician in the country, and most recruiting firms do have access. How robust they go is largely dependent on how they like to approach the market. It depends on what that client is actually looking for, but I mean, you can go as broad as the entire United States. Every general surgeon, we could get in touch with them very quickly. Whether it's email or sending them mailers. And yes, our internal database is robust, and we have people that are constantly cold calling through there. That's their job description, is they're finding people that are looking and then passing them along to the recruiters and seeing if they could use it. So that's very effective as well. But it's a real broad approach. You do everything. So that's what we do.
If there's a communication method, phone, text, email, even a postcard. I mean, any way that social media, any way that you can communicate as a human being in 2019, we're using it, and using it in some robust way with analytics tied to it. Because you have to be able to communicate on any platform that's available out there, so that you can reach the entire market, but also reach them in different ways, so that you can have a higher response rate to things that are just outbound to solicit to the market. Okay, we have this job, and we need to tap them on the shoulder and put it in front of them.
Have you had a successful career selling to businesses? Maybe tired of having your income limited by arbitrary compensation plans that penalize you for selling more? If so, you should consider tenant representation, a specialty within commercial real estate. At Riata Commercial Realty, Inc., we represent companies and nonprofits that occupy office buildings and warehouses. There is no limit on income, and the more you produce, the higher percentage you keep. If selling houses at night and on weekends sounds good to you, don't call us. But if you want to work business hours, have unlimited income, and leverage the relationships you already have, we want to talk to you. Please visit us at texastenantrep.com. That's Texas, Texas, tenant, TENANT, rep.com.
All right, we are back talking to Scott Edwards and David Fontenot of Adaptive Medical Partners. Check them out online at adaptivemedicalpartners.com. So, David, I hear that there is a doctor shortage. I didn't know that, but you guys mentioned that on a break. So, tell us about that.
The physician shortage, I mean, anybody that's in healthcare, hospital administration, physicians themselves, they're all feeling it and seeing it. For years, we've actually been feeling it in the rural areas of the country. Because doctors, quite frankly, they come out of training and they either want to be where their program is, right, because they've built friends and family
where their residency was,
or they want to be in a metropolitan area. Typically, a large part of the market wants to be in those areas. They're not necessarily looking to get to El Dorado, Kansas, or places that are rural sort of locations. Those are the folks that have needed help, not just right now, but they've needed help for a decade, maybe 2 decades. But nowadays we're starting to see that's impacting even Dallas and Houston and Austin, places all over the country that are huge metropolitan centers, that if there's anything that's unique or different or more challenging about their search in a metro market, they're challenged because there's so much competition these days. Because like Scott said earlier, there's way more opportunities out there. There's way more jobs out there where there's actually urgency, where there's patients to be seen that aren't getting seen, and there's not a doctor to fill that spot.
I mean, are people not going to medical school as much as they used to? Or?
It's not that, actually. That's what I think that's what a lot of folks think. But we're the 4th fastest growing country in the world. So population growth, that's part of it. I mean, we've got 600,000 to 1 million people coming in as immigrants into the country every year. And some of those are physicians, but there's not enough of those that are physicians coming in because of the visa stuff. And then you've got to think about our baby boomer population. 10,000 people turn 60 every single day in the U.S. So if you quantify that, we've got an aging population because of our baby boomer population that need more access to health care because they're getting older. So instead of seeing a doctor once a year for a physical, they're seeing 4 doctors every month and seeing different specialists. So there's a supply and demand problem. There's a lot of need from the patient base with population growth and our aging population that's not necessarily getting satisfied because we're not producing doctors on a level to be able to keep up. It's not the medical school population, but it is the residency population. So there were cuts to some of the funding that came from Medicare for the residency programs years ago that have limited the number of qualified residency programs in the country. It's limited that, and they haven't really been growing. So we've actually got medical students coming out of medical school that don't match with a program that probably should have, or even in the 80s and 90s they would have, that are either being forced to go into some other industry or some other market or wait, or pursue Caribbean medical school or Caribbean residency program that's not all that desirable in a lot of cases.
I mean, that is shocking to think that you go to school for 4 years on something that intensive, and then you can't get matched in a residency.
It happens
all the time.
That blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. And those foreign schools, like he's talking about, for the U.S. kids that can't, we won't say they can't get into U.S. med schools because they never say that, but choose to go that route.
It's not right
They're
now.
Very expensive, extremely challenging. But so when you get through it, you're probably pretty prepared. And I think the gold standard of that is can you pass your boards or not, and can you match in residency and things like that. So it ends up putting out good physicians. But for a lot of them, like he said, they can go all the way through, and they can't match for a residency program.
You know, it was interesting. I was raised to be a doctor. My dad was actually a nurse, and he, was always in a hospital, and so he raised me thinking I was going to be a doctor. I got to college and said, that's not what I want to do. So I went a different direction. So I didn't really understand all this about matching and all that kind of thing until one of my good friends' oldest daughter went to medical school, and she went to UT Southwestern, I think it is in Houston, and really loved the program down there. And that's when I first learned about the matching thing when she was finishing that. I had no idea that and the pressure these poor kids had on them to match or not match, and apparently it all happens in a single day. It really was surprising. It was a eye opener for me. So what's the consequence of all that? I mean, obviously we have a shortage of doctors. That must make your job all the more difficult, and because now you have a client that has a demand that I need somebody for this, but you just go to this other doctor, and that doctor must have a bunch of different options in front of them all the time.
It does make recruiting physicians more challenging, but imagine being a physician in this environment. You read articles, at least we read articles, and hospital administrators and physicians are seeing articles from all sorts of different news organizations talking about physician burnout. And there are still patients to be seen. So if I'm a family practice doctor, instead of seeing 20 or so a day, I'm seeing maybe 30 plus or even higher numbers than that. So the patients are either waiting to be seen or they're only getting a very limited amount of time with some organizations. Now, in a metropolitan area like Dallas, we're spoiled here as a patient because we can make choices. We have a lot of access. But you go out to more rural areas or even small metros of 250,000 people or less, and it's not quite that same way, especially if you needed to see a specialist.
So what's the impact you guys are seeing, if any, on this idea of concierge medicine, where they're not taking insurance, they're, I as an individual consumer can go sort of buy a membership to a doctor primary care practice. Is that really a factor much in your world?
Not yet. It'll only continue to grow, I think, just like telemedicine. Not to the level of telemedicine. Telemedicine is it's absurd the way that's taking off. But I would say it's going to continue to grow. You got to train the patient population in a way because it's different. It's unique. And so there's a lot of people that still haven't heard of that. And so it's not really affecting us. And I wouldn't say it's affecting our day-to-day yet, but yes, it's out there. And yes, we're hearing more of it. And so I guess that's going to continue to grow.
I mean, right now it seems like it's more of an interesting anecdote, but it's not really in front of us all the time. We did have a doctor on the show a couple of years ago, and he's the concierge doctor up in McKinney, and he was doing the normal track of becoming a partner in a practice, but he told me that he was timing the length of all of his patient interactions, and he had a stopwatch on the door on all the exam rooms. And then he did the same thing once he started his own practice as a concierge. And he says that he spends 3 times as much time with his patients now than he did in the, quote, traditional practice with insurance. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But then, of course, there's downsides to it as well. But that's another show. So how do you deal with these doctors? How do you know when a doctor is a good doctor or a bad doctor? I mean, I see somebody's, their diploma on the wall, but that doesn't really tell me anything, right? So how do you know if somebody's good or not?
First thing you should do is what everybody does is Google search the doctor. That's the very first thing. I know it sounds overly simple, but you'll find out a lot. I mean, we can do background checks. We can check with the state licensing boards. There's a lot of things we can do. And believe it or not, we've had Google checks show things that weren't on state licensing boards. So we're going to do all those things. We're also going to ask them to provide references. We make them sign their name to a whole bunch of things that every hospital is going to expect out of their physicians. Mm-hmm. So people have to be honest, but it always comes out in credentialing. When they go through the credentialing phase of a hospital, they're really thoroughly going to check them out again. So we're going to check them out on the front end, and they're going to be checked out again by their employer. So that usually catches the bad docs.
Are there any tools that will show you, like, for example, are they lazy? I mean, that sounds kind of silly, but I mean, how do you know that they're really going to do the job that they are being hired to do?
Well, we have ways of looking at their productivity logs. I mean, all of that stuff is out there. So we look at their productivity. We also use that for recruiting to see if they're being overworked. So if there's a surgeon, for example, that says they're doing X amount of cases and it's kind of, you can actually go and verify that these days and see that they are really as busy as they say they're going to be. In most cases, you can.
Wow.
But we also use that for recruiting, too, to see, okay, for their CBSA, they are way overworked, and this person is more likely to make a move. So we can tell that. And also you can tell quality scores at a hospital will tell you a lot as well. A great physician doesn't want to be at a hospital for very long that has a reputation for horrible quality scores. It's a matter of time their name gets attached to some suit by proximity. So we use those as tools as well to find out who may be looking or dissatisfied with their current situation.
The productivity thing is interesting to me because, I mean, how many industries are there where you can look up an individual's productivity from outside? And I mean, that's pretty amazing that you guys have that capability.
And we haven't always had that capability, but with things moving towards more of a quality and value-based sort of system, there's a lot of scoring and there's access to that because if they've been with a hospital facility, they're sharing that data.
Should consumers rely at all on the online reviews? I mean, I know you can read the online review and maybe get some nugget of information, but when you see these average scores comparing one, and it's not just doctors, it's everything, it's restaurants, it's, everything you can think of. Should we be relying on those when it comes to selecting a physician?
Not 100%, but it does tell a story. So you want to take that as part of all of your due diligence. You also want to, actually read the reviews. Don't just look at the stars.
Yeah.
But it's like anything else. Most people, they have a great visit. They don't run to their computer and talk about their great visit.
Yeah.
It's usually when they were, and sometimes it's not even on the physician. Sometimes the complaint is, I was in the waiting room for an hour and a half. But yet that review goes under that physician's name. So, you need to educate yourself. Don't ignore it. Look at it. It does tell a story about what it's going to be like to visit that practice at least. But if you see somebody is just every time you turn around, it's just a horrible experience, and it's going into detail about the doctor doing something that's inappropriate, and just bad experience after bad experience, I think it tells something. And when you're in a place like Dallas, for example, when there's a lot of options, why do that?
Why risk it?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I think you're right. And I start looking at scores for all kinds of stuff. Even when we're just driving through a city, we'll just pull up TripAdvisor or Yelp and give me the top restaurants, and then we pick where we're going to stop for that. All right, one more break. Be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Next Level Show. This is Bob Gibbons, and we're talking to David Fontenot and Scott Edwards of Adaptive Medical Partners. Check them out online, adaptivemedicalpartners.com. So how many employees do you guys have right now?
31.
31. Wow. And I read that you have some pretty big plans over the next few years to like double that or more. Is that right? That's pretty aggressive.
Yes, pretty aggressive. We've got some goals. We've got the space to do it. We built our own building, so that was one of the things we did. The commercial real estate piece that you might enjoy is we were looking around at lease space in Las Colinas, where we've been for a while, and people are really proud of their lease space there, especially if you want to improve it. So we wanted the space to feel more like an ad agency, more of like an IT firm, lots of natural light, things like that. So when you start talking about those types of specifics with landlords, they're like, okay, we're talking about a 10-year lease or what, and you're like, eh. So we've learned after we've outgrown our last couple spaces really quickly, let's buy our own land, build our own, and so that's what we did. So we can fit another 50 where we're at now.
That's amazing.
That's actually about 55 more people.
That's unusual that somebody would build something with that kind of growth in mind. That's one of the big objections why people don't buy is because they don't want to build or buy something bigger than what they need right now. And but it is actually the smartest long-term decision to make. As long as you have the down payment and you qualify for the loan and all that kind of thing, buying in most cases is going to be by far your lowest cost option in the long run. And even just the cash flow, forget appreciation. I run this analysis for clients all the time. You can usually buy for anywhere from 60 to 80% of what you can lease for over 10 years. But at the end, you still own something, right? So it really makes a lot of sense. So the fact that you guys did that tells me that you're really concerned about your employees' experience.
That's right.
In the company, not just how you look.
Yes.
So what are the kinds of things do you do with employees that is interesting?
When it comes to the work environment, Scott and I have always just wanted to have a place where we enjoy going to work personally, two of us. We wanted to enjoy that experience, and as we've grown and added so many people to this organization, this team, we want to keep that. So that's a lot to do with the people that are there and the culture, but also the space that you're in. So we paid attention to that. Yes, there's a ping pong table. Yes, there's a lounge where there's a TV for us to. What we're doing, recruiting physicians in this market, it's a very stressful, very demanding thing. So we need to be able to blow off some steam.
Yeah. Well, and I know that getting the right employee who is able to and willing to have the personality for talking on the phone a lot, all the time, and to the type of people that they need to be talking to. Because, a lot of times doctors and CEOs and such are not the easiest people to reach or to talk to.
Amen.
Yes, indeed. So
that takes a particular kind of person. So how do you screen somebody to make sure that they're going to really fit into that kind of an environment?
That's a good question.
Yeah, you don't get it right every time, but at the same time, trying to get people with experience at other firms. Home growing them is nice as well. It's just a longer ramp up, but I guess just the experience of doing it for a while. We've got a lot of people on the team that have been doing it for a long time, and so you kind of pick up on those little intangibles, I think. But you have to visualize them. How are they going to be across the table from a CEO? How are they going to be across the table from a physician? Are they going to be professional? Are they going to be a good representation of the company? So, and those people aren't always easy to find or get, hence the office space.
Yeah.
Trying to make it enjoyable. Another reason that we decided to start on our own is you can control things like that, your office environment, your office space, a place that you as an employee would like to be at yourself.
Yeah.
And then if it's a place you would like to be at yourself, chances are it's probably a place your employees would like to be. So, and our expectations are high for our employees. They would all clap to that probably because they know that what I'm talking about. But that's why we try to take good care of them as well, is because we expect a lot of them, but we have a lot to give back.
Yeah, and it's extremely expensive when one of those people leave and you have to replace them. So, yeah, I'm trying to make an environment where they want to be there,
Yep.
they like each other. All the rest is pretty incredible. I noticed on your website there was something called I think was it an AMP score? AMP score?
AMP score.
What is that all about?
See, I want David to talk. That's my baby, but I like to hear David talk about it better because he's more of the business development
Make
side.
sure he's getting it right.
Well, he's more of the business development side and talks about it, and I like the way he describes and talks about it, so I'll let him go with it.
Sure. Yeah, that was one of Scott's brainchildren, and fortunately for us as an organization, we have somebody that's as creative and able to think on things that don't exist in our market yet. But the AMP score, what it is it's a tool for any hospital clinic that's in the mode to recruit. They can use that to come up with their recruitability score. And yes, I know recruitability is not an actual word, but
I think it is, man. I think it
now.
Is it now? Okay.
I think it is. I think we made that a word. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Check
It's in the dictionary now. But it's a list of questions where a facility administrator can go in and fill out some information about their organization, about the community, that are things about the offer itself and what they're going to market with, and also their process to recruit. And then once they answer those, it's fed into an algorithm, and that algorithm was created by Scott and one of our IT developers that we work closely with.
A guy smarter than me that
Nice.
knows how to do that. Lot of trial and error to get that right.
So it's not truly AI because there's so much experience and years of experience with not just Scott, but also just the recruiting experience that we have in-house, that the scores are highly accurate to what an experienced hospital CEO might believe as far as the challenge, but it gives you a grade. Just like in elementary school, if you've got an 85, you're doing okay. If you've got a 95, you're doing great as far as how recruitable is the position. Now, we've had folks that have taken that and scored extremely high, maybe because of location, but still needed support because there's the one thing that they weren't able to get done on their own. And we've had other folks that score extremely low, 55, 60 on that because of several different factors. But it takes three major criteria, which one is where the position is and the amenity that's available, the offering from the facility, what type of organization it is, what are they offering, and then the process piece, which how they're recruiting and things they're doing or not doing that could be impacting their success. Because I know I keep coming back to this, but right now in this environment for physician recruiting, you said it yourself earlier, it's gotten difficult. It's very, very difficult to do it. The human interaction from whether you're recruiting on your own as a hospital administrator or it's the recruiter that you're utilizing that's an outside firm, that part's got to be perfect because there are other things you can't control where your position is. You can't, in some cases, control what your financial offering is going to be because that's dictated budgetarily. So there's some things that are just finite. You can't move them. So everything else, the communication piece, the timing piece, all of that's got to be done with perfection, no flaws.
So the AMP score, I assume, is an acronym for Adaptive Medical Partners, and that is a score that's specific to a particular position that you're recruiting for.
Yes, they had different specialties, and inside of they would go and do a separate score.
And then get a different score, and then there's some things that you can help with your score on, and there's some things that you can't help. You can't help if you're 3 hours from an airport, for example. I
Right.
mean, that's going to impact your score.
It is what it is.
But there's so many different variables and factors there. But it does give them an idea of how they compare in their state, so it spits out their score, and then it gives them a comparison at the state level for that same specialty.
Mm-hmm.
Then it gives them a comparison at the regional level for that specialty, and then the national level. So they kind of know how they're doing against their peers too, which is really cool. And there's no strings attached. We don't make them fill out all their info to get their score or anything. I think a lot of companies do that. There's always strings attached to a tool like that.
Yeah.
We decided to not make it that way. We'd love for them to leave. We give them the opportunity to leave because then we can call and consult them for free. I mean, we'd love for them to use our services, but they may want to say, why did I score this on this, or why did I score this on that question? And we can really unpack that for them and then give them some tips.
Interesting. I like that a lot. And I also like that you don't force them to give, every piece of information of their history, their blood type, et cetera, to get the information.
That's right.
I can't tell you how many websites I have left.
You X out of it, yep.
Because they want all this information. I was like, no, I just wanted the little thing, but no.
You're not falling for that, right? Yeah, and most people won't. So that's why
and
we have no strings
I do
attached.
sometimes.
Yeah.
If the value prop is big enough, I will do it, but many times I won't. Let's go back to your employees real quick. So with 30-something people in the company, there's got to be some leadership there besides just you guys, yes? So
Sure. Thank God, yes.
So is that something you guys develop internally and promote from within, or do you bring them from the outside, or is there any kind of pattern that you're finding?
So far, all of our director, our VP, everybody in a leadership role, we've brought up from pure production, and whether they're on the recruiting side, the business development side, wherever, we've brought them up from within.
Nice.
Will we always do that? I don't know. It's a preference, sure. But if we were to hire somebody in from outside, even if they had that level of experience, we would want them to prove themselves to the team as far as being able to do the job function, whatever that role is, before they were given the leadership title.
Yeah. So you guys are closing in on 10 years into the company. What do you see for the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, we're going to continue to stay relevant. We don't want to be a reactionary company. That's the number one thing. We like to be on the front. So we're constantly pushing. I mean, we could get satisfied. We could sit back and be satisfied. Say, hey, we're making some money. Hey, we've got a pretty decent footprint. Hey, we've got some nice employees, nice little team. Some people, I think, some entrepreneurs or business owners, they cling to that for dear life. They're so scared for that to go anywhere, in which I think we all are on some level, but we don't let that paralyze us. We're constantly wanting to be better, and we're not going to be happy until every single hospital, every single clinic in the country, every doctor has at least heard of us. They don't have to work with us, but that's the goal. And
But if they hear from you, they're going to want to work with you, right?
I hope.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. Really enjoyed it. Listeners, please go to adaptivemedicalpartners.com to learn more. For the show, check out thenextlevelshow.com or look us up on podcast and YouTube at The Next Level Show. Be back next week with another great guest.
Thanks, Bob.